picture this scenario. You have done the hard part. You spent months saving up the money. You scoured the internet for the best flight deals. You navigated the chaos of airport security, and you are finally there. You're standing in the middle of a bustling square in a new city. The architecture is gorgeous. The street food smells incredible. The sun is hitting your face, and then you realize you have absolutely no idea where your hotel is.
And that is the moment the movie montage ends and reality crashes in.
Right. The music just stops. Your heart rate spikes. You need to ask a local for directions. And suddenly you realize that your high school English classes, they focused a lot on Shakespeare, but maybe not so much on how to politely ask a stranger for directions.
Without sounding like you're about to mug them.
Exactly.
It is the classic traveler's dilemma. We assume language is just about vocabulary. We think, okay, if I know the word for bus and where, I'm good to go. But it's so much more than that.
It's tone, it's nuance.
It's everything.
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at a source called The Traveler's Guide to Avoiding Essential English Errors by Teacher Sam. And I have to say, looking through this isn't a grammar textbook. It feels more like crisis management.
That's a great way to put it. The mission here isn't to get you a perfect score on an exam. It's to move you from what it calls school English, the rigid, rule-based stuff,
Right.
to real-world tool English. Because when you're on the road, English is a survival tool. It's how you eat, sleep, navigate, and stay safe.
And the stakes are totally different. In a classroom, if you mess up a sentence, the teacher corrects you, and, well, life goes on.
But on a trip, if you mess up, you might end up on the wrong side of town or accidentally insult the one person who can actually help you.
Or worse. The guide makes this point right at the start. Small, subtle mistakes can lead to genuine confusion or even, dangerous situations. It's not about having a perfect accent. It's about clarity.
Pun intent.
So let's get into the weeds. The guide breaks down 10 mistakes, but they all seem to stem from how our brains actually process a second language. First up is what the source calls the trap of direct translation.
This is the big one. Mistake number 1. It comes down to a psychological concept the author calls comfort brain.
Comfort brain. I like that. It sounds cozy.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's actually a trap.
It is absolutely a trap. Your brain craves what's familiar. It takes a huge amount of energy to speak another language.
Of course.
So to save energy, your brain just grabs the grammar map from your native language and plugs the English words into those old slots.
So it's like using a map of Paris to navigate London. You just stick new labels on the streets.
Perfect analogy. And the result is often sentences that, well, they're English words, but the structure is completely alien. The source gives a pretty harmless example first. I very like this place.
I very like this place. Okay, I hear that a lot, actually. It sounds enthusiastic.
It does. And honestly, people will understand you. But it's technically wrong. We'd say, I really like this place. But again, that's low stakes. No one's getting mad about that.
So what's a high-stakes example? Where does comfort brain actually cause trouble?
Okay, try this one. Imagine you're at a border crossing or a train station, and you ask someone, where you go now?
Where you go now? Yeah, I see what you mean. It sounds a bit forceful.
It sounds like an interrogation. It sounds aggressive. The correct English needs those little helper verbs. Where are you going now? But a lot of languages don't use them, so comfort brain just cuts them out.
And when you cut them out, you lose the softness.
Precisely. You lose the nuance. Suddenly, you aren't making polite conversation. You sound like a police officer demanding an answer.
That's fascinating. So it isn't just a grammar error. It's a social signaling error. You're signaling aggression when you mean curiosity.
That is the key insight. So the fix that Teacher Sam suggests is a mindset shift. You have to stop thinking in sentences and start thinking in ideas.
Okay, break that down for me.
How
do I think in ideas?
Instead of taking your native sentence and translating it word for word, you pause and ask yourself, what is the simple English idea here? The core concept, like, I want to know your destination, has a standard, simple English phrase. If you focus on that, you bypass the comfort brain trying to force its old grammar rules.
Sounds like we need to be less like Google Translate and more like, well, an actual human.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And speaking of tone, that leads us directly into the second big category in the guide, the hidden power of politeness.
This section really stood out to me. I think native English speakers, we just take for granted how much our language relies on these little buffers. We rarely say exactly what we want, do we?
We really don't. English is incredibly sensitive to tone. In many cultures, being direct is polite. It's efficient. You go to a shop, you say, give me bread, you pay, you leave.
Well,
No offense taken.
but if I walk into a bakery in London or New York and say, give me bread,
You'll get the bread, sure, but you'll also get a very cold look. In English, a direct command like that can feel rude. The example the guide uses is ordering water. Give me water.
sounds like a hostage negotiation. Give me the water and no one gets hurt.
It really does. It creates this weird hierarchy. The source contrasts that with the golden structure. Could I have some water, please?
It's night and day. Could I have versus give me.
Or the taxi example. I want a taxi. That sounds like a toddler. Compare that to, could you help me get a taxi, please?
The second one frames it as a partnership. Could you help me? You're acknowledging their role.
Exactly. You're inviting them to assist, not barking an order. And the guide makes a really practical point here. This isn't just about being a nice person. It's about getting better results.
Right. It says politeness gets you better service.
Absolutely. If you start with a demand, the other person's wall goes up. They do the bare minimum. But if you start with could you or would you mind, you're building a tiny bridge. People want to help nice people.
So the genius tip isn't to learn complex grammar. It's just to memorize those magic words.
Basically, when in doubt, soften it. Could you, would you, and please. It's a safety net for your tone.
Now, there's a trap on the other side of this. We talked about being too direct, but mistake number 7 is about trying to be too casual. The slang trap.
Oh, the slang trap. This is painful to watch. This happens when a traveler really wants to bond. They want to show they're not some stiff tourist.
Keep them watching Hollywood movies.
Exactly. So they walk up to the 50-year-old hotel concierge and say, hey, bro, give me room key.
Oh, I cringe just hearing you say that.
It's bad. Bro, it's for peers, you know? Using it with a professional who's handling your passport just feels disrespectful or just bizarre.
It's like wearing a Halloween costume to a business meeting. The context is all wrong.
Perfectly put. Slang is high-level stuff. It depends on age, region, social status. If you get any of those wrong, you look foolish.
So the advice is, don't try to be cool.
Just be clear. Stick to the classics. Good morning, sir, ma'am. You'll never offend someone by being too formal.
Right. Okay, moving from tone to social friction. There are these two little words we use constantly, sorry and excuse me. Mistake number 3 is mixing them up.
This is a classic. In a lot of languages, there's just one word that covers both I want your attention and I apologize. But in English, they are very distinct.
So when do I use which one?
Excuse me is for attention or space. You want to get past someone on a train. Excuse me. You want to ask a waiter for the bill. Excuse me. You haven't done anything wrong.
And sorry is admitting fault.
Yes. Sorry means I made a mistake. You spill coffee on someone, that's a sorry.
So if I walk up to a stranger and say, sorry, where's the station?
You're subconsciously signaling that your very presence is a burden. You're apologizing for existing. It just projects nervousness.
Whereas, excuse me, where's the station? Projects.
Confidence. It says, I have a right to ask this question. It sounds subtle, but it makes a difference.
Speaking of confusion, and this is my favorite part of the whole guide, let's talk about mistake number 4, the boring versus bored disaster.
Ah, the adjective ending debacle. The great war between Ed and Ing.
This one feels like a rite of passage for every English learner. I feel like we've all done this at least once.
Oh, absolutely. The rule seems simple. Ed describes a feeling inside you. Ing describes the thing that's causing the feeling.
Simple in theory, but in practice.
In practice, you get a traveler at a dinner party. They're jet-lagged. They have no energy. They want to say, I am bored, but they say,
I'm boring.
And you've just told the entire table, I am a dull person with no personality.
It's accidental self-sabotage. You're just roasting yourself.
It is. And native speakers will usually just nod politely because they know what you mean, but the literal meaning is just so self-deprecating.
So the simple rule is, Ed is for me, dig is for the thing.
Exactly. The movie is boring, so I am bored. The hike is tiring, so I am tired. Get this one right.
Okay, let's shift to the mechanics of the language itself. We've talked words and tone, but what about the actual sounds? Pronunciation. Mistake number 6.
English spelling is, well, it's a crime scene.
It really is. It makes no sense a lot of the time.
It's a mix of German, French, Latin, and we kept the old spelling even after the pronunciation changed centuries ago. So you get a word like Vegetables.
Logically, that should be VGE table. 4 syllables.
But we crush it down to 3. Vej, tubul, or my favorite, receipt, R-E-C-E-I-P-T.
Why is the P there? It does nothing.
It's purely decorative. It's silent. It's receipt. But a learner's brain wants to pronounce every letter.
And that kills confidence, right? Because you see the word, you know what it means, but you're terrified to say it.
Exactly. And that fear leads to mumbling. And mumbling just leads to, sorry, can you repeat that? Which creates more anxiety.
So what's the practical advice from Teacher Sam? Do we need to become phonetics experts?
No. Keep it simple. First, just accept that English spelling is a liar. Don't trust it. Second, if you're really unsure, use your phone. Show them the word on the screen.
That's a valid move.
100%. It's better to show the screen and say, I'd like this, than to freeze up. Context is your best friend. If you ask for the recept with a hard P, the waiter knows you want the receipt. They're not going to bring you a potato.
Exactly. Confidence matters more than perfection here.
That leads us to the other mechanical nightmare, prepositions. Mistake number 9. The tiny words, in, on, at, to.
These are the gnats of the English language. They are small, they're annoying, and they are everywhere. And there's often zero logic.
The example that always gets me is transportation. In a car, but on a bus.
And on a train, on a plane, but in a taxi.
Why? Is there a reason?
There's actually a loose rule for this one. They call it the platform rule. If you can stand up and walk around inside the vehicle, you are generally on it.
Like, you're on a platform, you're on a bus, on a plane. If you have to sort of crouch and sit down immediately, you are in it. In a car, in a taxi.
Wait a minute, that actually makes sense. I can stand on a bus. I cannot stand in a taxi.
See? It helps. But then you arrive in a city, but you arrive at a building.
And that's where the logic just falls apart for me.
And that's where the guide says to stop trying to find the why. The advice here is just pure mimicry. Listen to how native speakers say it and copy the pattern. Don't try to reason your way through prepositions.
Surrender to the chaos.
Surrender to the chaos. That's the best way to put it.
All right, that brings us to a much more serious category. We've talked about awkwardness and politeness, but this guide gets very serious when it shifts from avoiding embarrassment to staying safe. Mistake number 8, not knowing emergency English.
This is crucial. We all like to think we'll be calm in a crisis, but biology tells us otherwise. When you're stressed, your brain goes into what's called an amygdala hijack.
Your fight or flight response.
Correct. And when that happens, the complex brain functions you need to speak a second language, they just shut down. You revert to your native tongue.
So you could be standing there screaming for help in a language nobody around you understands.
Exactly. And in an emergency, seconds matter. You do not want to be fumbling with a translation app or trying to remember a verb conjugation.
So this has to be rote memorization, like a fire drill.
Yes. You need a panic toolkit, a few key phrases. I need help. Call the police. I need a doctor. This is an emergency.
I need help. It's 3 words, but if you have them locked and loaded,
it cuts through the noise. And the guide is very clear. Memorize these before you travel. Treat them like travel insurance. You hope you never have to use them, but you're irresponsible if you don't have them.
That is a sobering point. But it actually connects to the final mistake in the guide, which is about simplicity. Mistake number 10 is saying too much.
The paradox of simplicity. This usually happens when learners are trying too hard to be polite or sophisticated. They think longer sentences mean better English.
The waffle.
The waffle. Excuse me, I was just wondering if it would be at all possible if you could perhaps maybe point me in the direction of, and by the time you get to the point, the listener has tuned out.
Or they're just confused.
Right. Complex grammar just introduces more ways to make mistakes, but if you just say, could you help me find the station, please? It's bulletproof.
It's all about the signal-to-noise ratio.
Yes. Short sentences project clarity. And as we said before, clarity breeds confidence. If you keep it simple, you're understood the first time. That gives you a little dopamine hit. Hey, I did it.
I love that. Simplicity isn't stupidity, it's strategy.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've covered the comfort brain, the politeness trap, the boring disaster, and the safety essentials. As we wrap up, I want to go back to the philosophy of Teacher Sam's guide.
The core philosophy is that good travel English isn't about perfection. We get obsessed with perfection in school, but on the road, it's about connection.
There's a line here that really stuck with me. People don't judge your accent, they feel your confidence.
That's the big psychological shift. We project our own insecurities onto other people. We think the waiter is judging our vowel sounds. I promise you they aren't. They just want to know if you want sparkling or still water.
And when you realize that nobody is grading you, It's so liberating.
It changes everything. It moves you from being a tourist who's just observing from a distance, scared to engage, to a traveler who connects. And you connect by trying.
The guide uses the term brave English.
Brave English. I love that concept. It is so much better to speak bravely and make a mistake, maybe even a funny one, than to just stay silent and miss the entire experience.
That really resonates. How many conversations have we all missed out on because we were afraid of using the wrong preposition?
Far too many. The goal is to be human. If you make a mistake, just smile, correct it, move on. That vulnerability actually makes people like you more.
So here's a challenge for everyone listening. The next time you're in a situation where you can use a second language, try the brave English approach. Stop worrying about the ed and the ing. Just focus on the connection.
And ask yourself this question. If I stop trying to be perfect, where could I go next?
That is the question. Speak, smile, learn. The world is waiting. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Safe travels, everyone.